What we just learned about the New York Mets is insane. For whatever reason, Carlos Mendoza will be returning as the skip in 2026 after managing the most disappointing season in the history of Major League Baseball. So stay tuned only here on Mets Digest to find out why and all the news revolving around Mendy. I'm your host, Mike Duda, and before we discuss a move that fans are greatly questioning, we got to talk about some subscribers, and that being the fact that 72.1% of you that watch these videos aren't one. So please do me a favor, do us a favor here on Mets Digest, and hit that free subscribe button. That way we can bring content to you about the Amazins. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this news. And as I mentioned, Carlos Mendoza will return as the manager next year per David Stearns. Thank you to Anthony Giacomo, MLB Insider, New York Met Insider, for tweeting this one out, as the Mets will evaluate their coaching staff over the next week. So now that we've heard from Tacoma, we've heard the very basics about the move, let's go ahead and hear from the upper management in the New York Mets system as to why they're making this decision. And we're going to start it off with Jorge Castillo of ESPN, who says, despite a stunning 3.5-month collapse to miss the playoffs, finishing 83-73, Carlos Mendoza will return as manager of the New York Mets for the 2026 season, President of Baseball Operations David Stearns said on Monday. That was yesterday. Stearns said the team will evaluate the remainder of the coaching staff within the next week before making further decisions. Now, I'm going to have a video coming out on that about the coaching staff and where I think people are going to get fired, where I think people should get fired, etc., going down the laundry list over on that. But that's for a different day. That's a different video, because today we are solely focusing on the decision to keep Carlos Mendoza. Now, here's exactly what Stearns had to say on that front. He said, I believe Carlos has all the same traits and assets that I believe he had when we hired him 2 years ago. And I think over the course of his tenure here, he has demonstrated that. We had a tough year this year. There's no questions. We are all disappointed. We were all frustrated. Mendy, as much or more than anybody else. But I still believe he's a very good manager, and I think he's going to demonstrate that. Well, I couldn't disagree more. I think this is ridiculous. I mean, look at this. I know this is a pretty bad picture because this is all that I could get from the broadcast, but this is when Mark Vientos got thrown out. Only 2 New York Met players were ejected this year, and they were both in the month of September, Jeff McNeil and Mark Vientos. Now, it's the same thing for McNeil. Whenever you look at the broadcast, every camera angle that you see of McNeil getting thrown out, arguing with an umpire, doing whatever, you will not see Carlos Mendoza in there. Just like in this picture when Mark Vientos got thrown out, Carlos Mendoza is nowhere to be found. And the reason why I picked this one, look, Pete Alonso, who, as you heard 2 days ago from Adam, most likely won't be a New York Met. He might, you don't know. He's testing the free agent market now. Again, more details, more videos coming on that later. We got a lot coming out as the offseason is kicking up here, after the most disappointing season in the history of baseball here in Flushing. But I mention this because Alonso is great. He's a leader. Why is the first baseman of the New York Mets going to protect his guy in Mark Vientos as opposed to the manager? That is the manager's job. When a player gets ejected, you too, as the manager, need to get thrown out, or at bare minimum, have a conversation with the umpire. Go out there, make sure that Vientos isn't getting into any trouble, back him away from the situation. But no, Mendy left this to Pete Alonso, and this really irked me because it's happened twice before. And look, before I go into this crazy rant, let's very quickly sum up the season, because I think a lot of what I have to say that is so negative about Carlos Mendoza comes from this. It comes from this disastrous season. We started on June 12th. Kodai Senga's season goes off the rails. Now, this is courtesy of ESPN. I really like what they put together. This was the top 10 moments that basically ended the New York Mets season, the top 10 moments that allowed this insane collapse, starting with Senga going off the rails. Now, after that game, the Mets were 45-24, the best out of the entire season, 21 games above 500, 5.5 up on the Phillies in the National League East, and that's really sizable for the month of June, especially when the Phillies have played great baseball the entire season. The Reds record, now this is something to note, if you haven't followed me, if you haven't followed the Mets, the Cincinnati Reds are the reason why the Mets are not in the playoffs. The Mets and the Reds had the same record this year, but Cincinnati got in because they had the tiebreaker. Now, at this moment, they were just 1 game above 500, a full 10 games back of the Mets. The Mets' projected playoff percentage, 96%, almost a guarantee that they make the playoffs, and it's only June 12th. But we go to the next day, it's June 13th, the beginning of a spiral. The Mets would end up losing 14 of the next 17 games in this stretch as they started it 45 and 25, down to 20 games above. You lose a game everywhere except for Cincinnati because the Reds lost that day, and you lose 1% when it comes to the playoffs. Now, to close out this really, really bad stretch, you got blown out in 3 separate games and swept by the last place, one of the worst teams in baseball, Pittsburgh Pirates. That got the Mets to 48 and 37, and they were now in second place, 1.5 back of the Phillies and just 3.5 games above the Cincinnati Reds. Still, playoff projections, 78%. They should be fine, right? Well, we go into July, and this was very important. This was the first series in the second half of the New York Mets season. So when David Wright had his number retired, we did a live stream here when that happened here on Mets Digest, and the Mets ended up losing 2 out of 3 to Cincinnati. That brought the record down to 55 and 43. Still 12 games above 500. You're only half the game out of the Phillies. You're still 4 up on the Reds, and you got an 83.5% chance to make the playoffs. They got hot in the middle of this, but this would end up coming to bite them. We will talk about that in just a little bit because we go over to August 3rd. Frankie Montas struggles, and the New York Mets lose first place for good at a record of 63 and 49. They would not go back to that division lead, but still at this point, they had a 94% chance basically of making the playoffs. Now we go a week later, and they're down to just 77.5. Because they're only 8 games above 500. They're already 5.5 back of Philly. They are definitely out of the division for good. And the Cincinnati Reds are just 1.5 game back of the New York Mets. Now we go into September the 8th. It's a 1-run loss against the Philadelphia Phillies, and they ended up getting swept in a 4-game set. This put them at 8 games above. Still, 92% chance that you make the playoffs in September. The Reds are only 4 games back of you. Everything should be fine. But they got swept in a critical 4-game series against the Phillies. The Reds did well during this time, and now Jacob deGrom makes his return to Citi Field. I was there for that. That's when I had my rant about Ronnie Mauricio not paying attention, the Met defense being awful. That's a whole nother point, and we're going to have so many videos going over this 2025 season. In fact, I'm thinking of even making a series on it, so if you have any ideas, any suggestions about that, go down there in the comment section. Let me know if you would want a series that basically goes over how putrid this year was. But after deGrom returned, shut down the Mets, we were just 4 games above 500, down to a 72.8% chance to make the playoffs, as the Reds were 1.5 games back. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is the 21st. The Mets dropped another series, that's being the second to the Washington Nationals, and they fall from the postseason position for the first time. At 80 and 76, they were tied with the Cincinnati Reds. Remember, we don't have the tiebreaker because the Mets lost 4 out of 6 to the Reds during the regular season. Just over half of the percent, just over 50% chance to make the playoffs. So you still think that the Mets have a chance? Well, let's turn it over to September 27th. All games start at 3 o'clock because it's the last day of the regular season. By about the 7th, 8th inning, it is known the Cincinnati Reds have lost. The New York Mets and the Cincinnati Reds entered the day in a tie. But remember, the Reds had the tiebreaker. So a Reds win would get them in the playoffs. But they didn't win. They lost. All the Mets had to do was win a baseball game, and they would get into the playoffs. Now let's see how Carlos Mendoza managed this. He started Sean Manaea, which was definitely questionable in the first place, but it worked. He pitched 1 2/3, no hit innings. Yes, I know he gave up 2 hits, but he was at 38 pitches, and this is a starting pitcher. So why are you taking him out? He puts in Huascar Brasban. He does okay, but then comes Brooks Raley. He gives up a run, and down 1-0 in the 4th inning against the Miami Marlins, I wouldn't say one of the worst teams because they only finished 4 games worse than the Mets, but a team that you definitely need to beat, a team that you should beat in the 4th inning with the season on the line. Carlos Mendoza continues his trends of managing like he's in spring training or a throwaway game in April and brings in Ryan Stanek. Stanek blows it up. Tyler Rogers comes in, and Tyler Rogers is coming in a situation where there's runners on base. I wanted to create a stat. I think I might when it comes to Rogers with a Met uniform and mention it here on Mets Digest called IRA, Inherited Runs Earned. basically being ERA or inherited runs allowed, basically like ERA, except you sub out earned runs for inherited runners that you gave up. I think Tyler Rogers' IRA is higher than his ERA. It is ridiculous. Then Edwin Diaz comes in the game in the 6th, maybe the 7th inning, and he pitches an inning. I think it was the 5th, maybe the 6th. He pitches an inning. Why? Save him for the end of the game. Hopefully you make a comeback. You're already down 4-0. The bats aren't showing anything. Then Ryan Helsley and then Gregory Soto. So Mendoza managed the last game of the year really, really bad on elimination day. And of course, the Mets lost and started one of the biggest collapses in recent history, definitely the biggest collapse in 2025, and just a putrid season overall. Now, there are such thing as managerial statistics. We take a look at Carlos Mendoza. I know he's an above 500 manager, but the way that he manages is terrible. As you can tell from the stats on your screen, yes, he steals second a lot, but that is because of Antoine Richardson, the Mets' first base coach. He barely steals third. He doesn't do sack bunts. He doesn't do he does substitutions, but he doesn't do them well. Overall, Carlos Mendoza is a very, very bad manager. He doesn't have a feel for the game. And as I've mentioned and expressed multiple times here before, Carlos Mendoza's press game conferences are awful. He says the same thing every single time. You know how many times he mentioned that we are in a bad stretch? Well, this bad stretch, as we heard from Castillo earlier, was 3.5 months long. This was not a stretch. This was not even a collapse. This was just slowly coming down, slowly breaking down, and boom, the New York Mets do not make the postseason. Carlos Mendoza is a big blame. I don't care what anyone has to say. The way that he manages the bullpen is not good. He sets out bad starting lineups, putting Jose Siri and Cedric Mullins in there instead of Tyrone Taylor. He always finds a way to put Ronnie Mauricio in the game, and I'm a big advocate of Ronnie Mauricio. I thought he was always going to be a very good player. He brings him in, and he has just been very, very bad up here in the pros. Just so many things I can go on and on about Carlos Mendoza and the reasons why I don't like him. But let's go ahead and hear from the owner of the New York Mets, Steve Cohen, instead, because I can't rant forever about Mendoza. It's a disservice to all of you. So, Cohen tweeted yesterday, Mets fans everywhere, I owe you an apology. You did your part by showing up and supporting the team. Over 3 million fans showed up to Citi Field this year, the most ever in Mets history. We, as in the New York Mets, didn't do our part. We will do a post-mortem and figure out the obvious and less obvious reasons why the team didn't perform up to your and my expectations. We are all feeling raw emotions today. Keep in mind, Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets, is a New York Met fan. He grew up in Queens. Or rather, he grew up on Long Island. I know how much time and effort you have put into this team. The result was unacceptable. Your emotions tell me how much you care and continues to motivate the organization to do better. Thank you to the best fans in sports. Now, the co-owner, Alex Cohen, his wife, also tweeted, this being today, saying, to our fans, this season didn't end the way any of us had hoped, and like you, we feel the disappointment of not making it to the playoffs. Still, our belief in this team remains as strong as ever. Most of all, we are deeply grateful to you, our fans. Your passion, energy, and unwavering support carried us through every high and every low. Owning this team is not just about baseball. It's about being part of a community that believes together. It's something bigger than the game itself. As we move into the offseason, I'll be stepping away from the work Instagram to recharge and refocus. I remain committed to the work I do for the fans and look forward to reconnecting again in the spring. I'll also be deactivating my email. I originally created it to stay connected with you all, but it ended up becoming a platform for the same thing fans were already DMing me about. Please know this decision comes from a place of respect and balance. Thank you for staying with us this season. We'll be back, stronger and hungrier than ever. Until then, keep believing, keep cheering, and know how much we appreciate you. With gratitude, Alex Cohen. So, definitely a very interesting thing that she ended up tweeting today. This was right before this video is coming out. So go down there in the comment section. Let me know what you think about Alex Cohen's tweet. Definitely something very interesting as she's stepping away from social media. And let me know what you think about Steve Cohen's tweet. Both of them, I truly believe, want the best interest of the New York Mets. But maybe not, because they're not firing David Stearns, who I think is responsible for a good portion of this. Another guy that I think is a big portion of this is Carlos Mendoza. You all know how I feel, but let me know what you think down there in the comment section below. I think you have a missed opportunity. You can get rid of Carlos Mendoza right now, bring in either Bob Melvin or Bruce Bochy, both of which were fired. They let go on mutual terms, that being in Bochy's case with the Rangers. Melvin no longer with the Giants. They're both available managers. They're sustained managers. They have proven success. But I don't want to rant all day. Again, that's a disservice to you. And I just want to thank you for watching today's video. Again, plenty of coverage coming this offseason, from trade rumors to free agent rumors to what the Mets are going to do from the coaching staff to how bad this 2025 season is and how we can get a step forward and make a progressive step in 2026 and hopefully go win it all. I know it's early, but go enjoy the playoffs. And as always, let's go Mets.